There is a truth buried deep beneath every addiction, one that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Addiction is not simply about the substance, the behavior, or the craving. It is about something sacred that has been lost, a cry from the depths of the soul asking to be seen, understood, and healed. When you strip away the shame, the judgment, the social labels, what you find is not a broken person, but a wounded one, someone whose inner world has become divided against itself. The conscious mind seeks control while the unconscious cries out for meaning. And that conflict, that dissonance becomes unbearable. So the person reaches for something, a drink, a pill, a screen, a ritual, anything that promises temporary peace. But peace cannot come from escape. It can only come from integration. Every addiction is a symbolic attempt to reunite with something divine, something the ego has forgotten but the soul remembers. The alcoholic does not crave the liquid itself. They crave silence, the stilling of the inner storm. The gambler does not crave the cards. They crave the momentary illusion of control. The perfectionist does not crave success. They crave love that feels finally earned. Beneath the compulsion lies a spiritual hunger, a thirst for wholeness. What if addiction, rather than being the enemy, is the messenger? What if it arrives not to destroy you, but to reveal the part of you that has been exiled? The part that learned it was unacceptable, too angry, too needy, too alive. When the conscious mind banishes what it cannot tolerate, the shadow takes custody of it. And when that shadow grows starved for attention, it begins to speak through dreams, through compulsions, through suffering. To heal addiction, you must stop fighting your shadow. You must listen to it. You must ask, what part of me is crying out through this behavior? What have I refused to feel? What am I terrified to remember? That is the beginning of true recovery, not abstinence, but awareness. Carl Jung once said that the psyche is not a machine that malfunctions, but a living system that seeks balance. Even its darkest expressions are attempts at healing. Addiction, then, is not chaos. It is communication. The psyche is trying to restore equilibrium by forcing the conscious self to confront what it has ignored. And so, when you numb yourself, you are not silencing the pain, you are silencing the truth. Every craving is a coded message. Every relapse is a forgotten language. The psyche will keep repeating the lesson until it is learned. Because deep down, the soul is not interested in comfort. It is interested in growth. The modern world misunderstands this entirely. We call addiction a disease of weakness, and we try to cure it with willpower. We medicate the symptoms but ignore the symbol. In ancient times, the addict would have been brought to a temple or a shaman, not to be condemned, but to be initiated. The ritual was sacred because it was understood that when someone loses themselves to darkness, they are being summoned to transformation. But today, there is no ritual, no map, no guide. The individual faces their suffering alone. The psyche, however, refuses to wait for culture's permission. It creates its own initiation. The addiction becomes a self-made ceremony, a dark mirror of the sacred journey. But without consciousness, it turns destructive. The addict becomes a self-initiate wandering without light, repeating the same ritual of escape, never realizing that the fire burning them is the same one that could illuminate them. Healing begins when you stop asking, "How do I quit?" and start asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" Every addiction protects something, an old wound, an unmet need, a forgotten truth. Beneath the behavior lies a story. Beneath the story lies a soul. When you finally listen to that soul, the compulsion begins to lose its grip because its message has been received. The unconscious is not merely personal, it is archetypal. It contains patterns of death and rebirth, exile and return, fall and resurrection. The addict is living out an ancient myth, the descent into the underworld. They are searching for light, but they cannot escape until they know the name of the God that brought them there. In myth, naming the God is the act of consciousness, the moment when the unseen becomes seen. So too with addiction. You must name the God that possesses you. Is it fear? Is it loneliness? Is it rage unspoken? The moment you can name it, it begins to lose its dominion. Because what is conscious can be integrated, and what is integrated no longer needs to rule you from the shadows. Every addiction, in truth, is a spiritual emergency. The soul's cry for wholeness disguised as destruction, and the only cure for spiritual starvation is meaning. Not discipline, not punishment, not even happiness, but meaning. Because when a person finds purpose, the energy that once fueled their addiction becomes the same energy that fuels their awakening. The void that addicts fear is not death, it is birth. The silence that terrifies them is the space where the old identity dissolves so the new self can emerge. The ego resists this with all its strength. It clings to the familiar, even when the familiar is killing it. But the self, the deeper, divine image within calls for transformation. It will use any means necessary to bring you to awareness, even suffering. There is no healing without descent. To transcend, you must first go down into the wound, into the memory, into the darkness you swore you'd never revisit. That is where the treasure lies. That is where the soul waits. It is not punishment, it is initiation. The work of recovery, then, is not to become pure, but to become whole. Wholeness means integration of the shadow, the child, the anger, the grief. Healing is not about becoming better. It's about becoming real. The light that blinds you is the same light that heals you, but you must be willing to face it. The moment you stop running from your pain and turn toward it, something miraculous happens. The energy that once drove your addiction begins to transform. The same intensity, the same passion, becomes creative force. The wound that once consumed you becomes the well from which wisdom flows. This is why those who have walked through addiction often become healers, artists, teachers, visionaries. The very darkness that broke them becomes the soil of their greatness. But this transformation can only happen through honesty, through standing before your own abyss, not to fall in, but to listen to what calls from its depths. Because what you fear in yourself is often the key to your freedom. The rejected part of you, the one you numbed, silenced, and disowned, is not a monster. It is a teacher waiting to be welcomed home. There is a moment in every true healing when the addict realizes that the addiction was never the enemy, it was the signal. The shadow was not trying to destroy you, it was trying to wake you. What it wanted was not another drink, another high, another victory, but acknowledgement. It wanted to be seen. The self, what Jung called the divine image within, has always been speaking. It speaks in symbols, in dreams, in synchronicities. When those messages are ignored, they harden into symptoms. Addiction is one such symptom, a sacred symbol that has been forgotten by consciousness. To heal is to remember what the symbol means. It means that something vital has been cut off from your awareness. Some inner truth has been exiled to the dark, and that truth is your power. The moment you bring it back into light, not with guilt but with compassion, the psyche begins to reorganize itself toward wholeness. You see, the unconscious does not demand perfection, it demands relationship. Healing is not the absence of darkness but the dialogue with it. The shadow remains, but now it is integrated. You no longer obey it blindly. You understand its language. When it whispers, you listen, but you also choose. That is freedom. Many people believe that when they recover, life will return to how it was before. It won't. You will not become who you were before the addiction. That self was too small. It was designed to survive, not to live. The journey through addiction is an alchemical fire. It burns away illusion. It reveals what is authentic. What emerges from that fire is not the same being who entered it. The new self is larger, quieter, more truthful. It knows the cost of unconsciousness and no longer wishes to pay it. It walks differently, speaks differently, loves differently. It understands that being human means being incomplete, and that wholeness is not perfection, but harmony. This is the essence of individuation, to become what you truly are, beyond the masks of control and the habits of avoidance. The shadow becomes a companion, not a threat. The ego becomes a servant, not a tyrant. And the self, that luminous center, becomes your guide. But let us speak of the most important thing: meaning. When a person finds meaning, addiction has nothing left to feed on. Meaning fills the void that substances once tried to fill. It gives the suffering a direction, a purpose, a mythic shape. Without meaning, the psyche creates compulsions. With meaning, it creates art, devotion, service, love. So ask yourself, what gives your suffering shape? What cause, what calling, what act of creation transforms your pain into purpose? That is your medicine. That is your path. Because the soul cannot live on avoidance, it must live on connection. The great paradox is that the very wound you despised becomes your initiation into consciousness. Addiction was not your failure. It was your initiation into awakening. You entered the underworld, and now you return with the gift of understanding. That gift is compassion, not the pity of the ego, but the empathy born of having met your own darkness and survived it. And so, when you encounter others still bound by their addictions, you will not judge them. You will recognize them. You will remember the fire. You will know that their suffering is not random but meaningful, that they too are being called toward the same wholeness that once called you. To heal is to remember that you were never alone, only unaware. The psyche has been guiding you all along. Even in your worst moments, something greater was moving through you, urging you towards self-recognition. Addiction is only the symptom of that divine impatience, the self's refusal to be forgotten any longer. You are not broken. You are becoming. Every step you thought was failure was actually initiation. The relapse, the shame, the despair, all of it was part of the descent that led you here. You do not need to erase your past. You need to redeem it by understanding what it taught you. The voice that once whispered for escape will one day whisper for expression. The hand that once reached for the substance will one day reach to create, to serve, to love. And when the shadow returns, as it always does, you will not fear it. You will say, "I remember you. You once ruled me. Now you walk beside me." That is what it means to be whole. And so, dear listener, if you are walking through your own darkness, know this: the path you are on is ancient. It has been walked by heroes, mystics, healers, and poets. It leads not to destruction, but to revelation. What you are going through is not the end, it is the beginning. Addiction was the veil. Awakening is what lies beyond it. When you listen, truly listen, to what your suffering is trying to say, you will discover that it was never against you. It was for you. It was the soul's last attempt to bring you home. And when that realization dawns not as an idea, but as a lived truth, the chains fall away, not because you forced them to, but because you outgrew them. What once held you captive becomes the ground on which you now stand free. You are not the wound. You are the light that reveals it. And that light, your awareness, is what the soul has been seeking all along.